Well, I'm Larry Diamond. I'm a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies at Stanford University. And it's been my great honor and pleasure to have been associated with the Asian Barometer survey since its founding 20 years ago. You know, I had actually had an association with the Asian Barometer before it was the Asian Barometer because of my collaboration with Professor Yunhan Chu through his original work with the Institute for National Policy Research and the conference we did in the mid-1990s on the third wave democracies around the world. And then Yunhan and I began to collaborate on the study of Taiwan's democratic development during the year that I spent a great year in my life at the Academia Sinica in 1997-98. And that is when I got introduced to the work of a man I think we could call, in a way, the intellectual godfather of the Asian Barometer survey, Professor Hoover. And Professor Hoover, I think, was not only a man of deep commitment to democratic studies, a trailblazer in political culture studies in Asia, but a very ingenious scholar and researcher to get at underlying core values and value change. And he had developed a set of measures to try and get at democratic attitudes, underlying attitudes toward democracy versus authority, and in a way, testing traditional or Asian values. And with Yunhan's assistance and collaboration, I was able to get access to this work. And I learned something very interesting during that year, which found its way into my book, Developing Democracy, that was published in 1999. And that is that there was a steady trend from the first survey that was done in 1984 through 1987, 1990, 1991, 93, 96. It wasn't perfect, but it was a pretty steady trend of growth in democratic value orientations. Or to put more precisely, on items that many of which we have used in the Asian Barometer ever since, a growing willingness to reject traditional or authoritarian value statements like too many groups would lead to chaos, or too many opinions, or too many parties would be chaotic for society, or that government should decide what issues should be allowed to circulate in society, or that women shouldn't be allowed to participate. And I think we learned the extraordinary importance of researching basic attitudes and values rather than simply using the D word, democracy. And we learned as well that you test people in a more probing way when they have to reject an authoritarian statement rather than simply agree with the democratic statement. And so these items have carried over through now 5 rounds, not all of them in exactly the same way, through 5 rounds of the Asian Barometer. And we see a stunning continuing trend. If you take our battery of authoritarian values, which are in some ways similar to the original Hoover measures, you see that Japan began as a pretty liberal democracy in the early 2000s with only 36% support on average for these values, and gradually declined through to the 5th wave, which we completed fairly recently, of 29% support. Taiwan gradually declined in its average support for these authoritarian values from 49% to 36%. And Korea gradually declined from 44% to 30%. And you can see as well, in terms of the willingness to reject authoritarian options altogether, authoritarian regime preferences, this same tendency that the rejection of all three of the authoritarian alternatives, one-party rule, one-man rule, and army rule, on average across the 5 surveys, gradually increased in Taiwan from 70 to 81%, gradually increased in Japan from 68% in wave 1 to 86% in wave 5, and stood about steady in Korea. It's gone, it improved and then it declined to about 70%. Whereas you find, unfortunately, quite serious deterioration in Mongolia and the Philippines. I think this underscores, I'm not going to continue with the specific data, but it underscores several things that we have, I believe, in the Asian Barometer survey, a very powerful diagnostic tool. That there is a tremendous value in repeating the same questions over and over across our multiple waves, so we can track resilience, improvement, or erosion over time in underlying democratic orientations and values, or their inverse, authoritarian values and regime preferences. And I think the Asian Barometer has done a real service to the growth of the intellectual infrastructure of democracy in Asia in recent years by inaugurating new research survey endeavors associated with the Asian Barometer in countries like Myanmar and Cambodia and some of the countries that we didn't begin with. And these research survey projects, public opinion survey projects, I think will serve well the ultimate goal of building the intellectual infrastructure for a pluralistic society. It's been really a remarkable effort of scholarship and collaboration. The solidarity among the different research teams has been deeply inspiring. And I tip my hat in profound admiration to Professor Yunhan Chu and the entire coordinating team in Taiwan.